many of you remember NWA and Eazy-E? They were some of the first, I guess, gangster rappers, maybe. Dr. Dre, I think, was part of NWA, and I can't remember all the characters. All I know is that I was working security at one of their concerts as a Norfolk police officer, doing some moonlighting, making some extra money. And during that concert, there was like a cloud of people that would cause a disruption, and then you'd see this group run away, and it would kind of stretch out like a snake and then disperse into the darkness. And it happened several times during the first act, and then when NWA came on, it'd be over here, and then it'd be the whole other side of the arena. There'd be this disturbance. We finally got word from someone. I should let you know that there was only 2 of us working, Norfolk police officers. Now, usually in those type of events, there'd be a half a dozen of us at least. And then there was the actual arena security, but they didn't carry guns or pepper gas or anything. So I don't know what they were supposed to do, talk people out of being violent, I guess. But we got word that what was happening was this was a group of mostly juveniles that were robbing people in the crowd, and then they would run away. They snatched jewelry off their neck or whatever, and we're like, oh boy, well, it's kind of impossible. The place is packed, thousands of people, and you just see this movement through the crowd, and then it dissipates, and how are you going to, until NWA had a song called F the Police, and I abbreviate F the Police. And, that gangster rap had a real problem with the police, sometimes legitimately so. But when they went into that song, it was as if all hell broke out. And the group that was causing all the trouble was on the floor where me and this other officer was at. And it was all of a sudden, the battle was all around us. And it was literally one of the biggest fights of my police career, just to get out of that melee. I mean, we're on the floor of a concert hall. Imagine hundreds, if not thousands of people around us on the floor, and all of a sudden fighting breaks out all around us. They tore the light stands down that were around us. They tore down these t-shirt stands that were in the back. And we didn't have pepper gas in those days. The only way out, I had a long flashlight, and I just started swinging it. And I hit a couple of people. I don't know who. It was dark, just making my way out to where I could get, is it called the Zamboni that they do the ice with during hockey games, where they come out the entranceways and on both sides of the arena. We finally made it out. And we just sat back and looked, called for backup, but we weren't going back into that fight. I think we grabbed a couple of them because they started coming down where we were and throwing trash cans at us because we're cops in uniform, right? But they ended up shutting the concert down. There was a shooting. There was a stabbing outside the concert. The big lights finally came up. It was a mess. Here's my point. The battle was happening all around us until suddenly we were in the battle. Get it? It just suddenly, it was there. We knew we were in a place where there was violence happening. It was close to us. But suddenly, we were in the midst of it. And by the grace of God and our training, we were somewhat combat ready, to deal with it the way that we knew how to deal with it. We didn't try to grab someone in that crowd and tackle them to the ground and handcuff them. They would have killed us. We just wanted to get out. We knew we needed to get out of that hole where we could sit back and look objectively and call for backup. My point is that battle's going to happen, and we better be combat ready. There's a battle for your emotions. Every day, there's a battle for your emotions. Are you going to have a good day or a bad day? We like to blame it on everything else, everybody else, but ultimately, joy is up to each one of us, right? Our attitudes belong to us. Our responses to problems belong to us. There's a battle for how we respond. There's a battle for our attention. There's a battle for our time, or a battle for our money, every dollar. Battle for our potential. There's a battle for your dreams. And we're going to take some hits along the way in this battle, no doubt. We're going to incur some wounds, but by the grace of God, they can make us smarter and they can make us stronger. So stick around and we'll get into part 2 of Combat Ready.
You're listening to Hope Signals, the podcast of Life on the Verge Ministries, offering Bible-based insights to help you live a life of purpose and passion.
Well, this is your host, Mark Mason. Thanks for listening to Hope Signals, the podcast of Life on the Verge. You can learn more about us at lifeontheverge.com. This is only my second time recording this thing for YouTube. I'm learning, I'm growing. Hopefully in 2025, we'll take it to a whole nother level. And I'd love to get your feedback. I got some pretty cool ideas from my dear friend, Jimmy Bratcher, today. We've been talking about, for those that don't know, Life on the Verge is we call ourselves a musicianary ministry. We use music, we go out, and we probably, at least to date, about 90% of what we do is in state penitentiaries. We tour prisons. It's our full-time gig. All over the country, we've been to prisons, and we have doors open everywhere for us to go and bring bands in and put on concerts and share inspiring, uplifting messages and also our Christian testimony. Sometimes we bring in guest speakers. We do multi-day events. We do single-day events, one-off things. But that's what we do. And there is a curriculum that we're hoping to put together next year. Some of you have been around. You've been listening to Hope Signals for a long time. For those that are just tuning in, maybe seeing this on YouTube, there is 5 years of podcasts, audio only, on Spotify and some of the other streaming services, Apple, or you can go to lifeontheverge.com, and it's also on our website, all those episodes. But I really need to get some feedback from some of you guys. Here's one of the things we want to do next year is create sort of a curriculum. It'll be a book that I want to write, and I want to create a curriculum, and I may bring in some outside help to also contribute. But the idea is that when we go to these prisons, we want to see what the interest is to get men to sign up, and women, for a curriculum called Living Life in Tune that will cover the basics of how to keep your faith life in tune, your fitness life in tune, your family life in tune, your financial life in tune, your friendship life in tune, and your field of endeavor, your career life in tune. I liken this to the 6 strings of a guitar. We want people to hear what we're playing, right, as Christians. And there's a lot of Christians that are in prison. The idea would be to create some curriculum that teaches to work with the chaplaincy. Once we go in and blow up and do our thing, our concerts and all that, then we would get guys that would sign up, and we would create these modules for them to go through that help them learn the basics of how to do life maybe a little better than they were doing. I mean, I was recently at a prison here in Virginia, and there was a group of young people in the back. It was 300 people, inmates, all classes of inmates, 300 of them in this gymnasium. And we didn't bring a big team in. It was me, my wife, and one other dude. And we're playing music, and of course I'm talking between songs. I'm encouraging, teaching, preaching, that kind of thing. And these guys in the back, they were standing up on their chairs and making a ruckus. Well, I think in retrospect, they were just excited. They had not had anything like this in forever. And they reminded me of Norfolk public schools that I went to. They were always the class clowns, always trying to get attention. So we're making a ruckus and almost being distracting. And I look back at them and I said, guys, you probably ought to listen up. Just chill out for a minute, okay, and pay attention, because you've got to find a better way. You are not a very good criminal. That is not the life for you. You know why? You know how I can tell you're not a very good criminal? You're in prison. And I said it kind of forcefully. I said, so you need to find a plan B, and we're here to help you find that. So that's what Living Life in Tune, the material, would be about. And where I would need your help is, as I do it, I may ask you to contribute some ideas. I would probably do it one module at a time. So just stay tuned for all that. That's something we're working on for next year, as well as a tour in Virginia prisons, Florida prisons, and way out west that will include Ohio and Montana at a minimum, but maybe even some other prisons on the way. We're still making calls. That's an update of Life on the Verge and what we do. We're coming up on the end of the year. Please consider us in your year-end giving. You can go to lifeontheverge.com, click the donate button, and man, we appreciate every gift. It's tax deductible. We are a 501c3. Enough said. So James chapter 1 is what we're talking about, where we're gaining some of this information, or where I'm deriving this teaching from. And I'll start with verse 1 and 2. Actually, it's 1 through 3. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes in the dispersion, greetings. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you face trials of many kinds. He says in this version, meet trials of many kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Okay, first off, we'll get into this deeper down the road because I'm going to take this kind of line by line. Let's talk about this passage. But when it says steadfastness, that word means patience. Man, how much better would life could be if we could all be just a little more patient, right? Man, that is a fruit of the Spirit that we all need. A little patience with one another, patient with God, patient with ourselves. I get so hurried and frazzled, and man, I mean, there's plenty of guys and gals in prison, mostly guys again, for road rage because they could not control themselves. They couldn't have enough patience to drive from work to home or whatever without losing it on somebody else in traffic. So here, James is going to show us how the testing of our faith helps us develop patience. But let's just do some background on the book. James, also known as James the Just, he's a half-brother of Jesus. His other half-brother was Jude, who may have been his whole brother, I guess. The James and Jude were sons of Joseph and Mary, whereas Mary, or Jesus, was really only the son of Mary and God, right? So they were half-brothers. James was the chief spokesman at the Jerusalem Council, so he was kind of a big dog. That's where the Jews were trying to figure out how to work the Gentiles into this whole Jesus movement. Are they supposed to obey Moses' law or not? And they came to an agreement of the things that most of my listeners are probably Gentiles, non-Jews, that we, abstain from sexual immorality, don't eat the blood of strangled animals, don't eat food sacrificed to idols. Oh gosh, I should know them all. There's one more. There's only 4 of these things. They said, look, tell these new Gentile folks they need to at least do this. And part of that whole don't eat the food of strangled animals and don't eat food sacrificed to idols was just to keep unity with Jews who found that repulsive. Nevertheless, James was part of the Council of Apostles that developed this whole deal. He was one of the 3 pillars of the early church. Galatians 2:9 talks about Peter, James, and John. They were like the 3 pillars of the early church. Scholars believe that he wrote this book in the mid-AD 40s, only about 10 years after Christ's ascent. They say if he had written it after the Jerusalem Council in AD 48-49, he would have surely mentioned it in the book of James. He does not. So it was written sometime between when Jesus left this earth physically and the Jerusalem Council in AD 48 and 49. So probably, probably like AD 40, 43, something like that. He was martyred in AD 62, and I read the account from Josephus. Some of you may not be aware. Pretty fascinating to read. Josephus was a Jewish historian. He was not a believer, but he's one of the sources outside of the Bible that talks about Jesus and his time on earth, and he gives an account of what happened, how James he was a contemporary of James as well, how James had been martyred. And if I recall, like there was a Roman governor, and so the way that the system worked back then, Rome controlled everybody, and under them, they used the Jewish kings to kind of be the go-between with the Jewish people, because the Jewish people were so unique, their religion, their customs, their culture, and the Romans didn't know how to relate, so they appointed leaders among the Jews. So when you hear Herod, it's King Herod, right? But he's a Jew, all right? But Pontius Pilate was the governor over that whole area when Jesus was crucified. But he sent Jesus to Herod to see what Herod thought about it. So this was kind of what was happening when James was killed. There was a Roman governor, and I think he was out of the area, and the newly appointed high priest just decided to call a Sanhedrin, a meeting, and had James martyred in his absence, which was way out of bounds, and that guy ended up losing his position as high priest. But nevertheless, James was stoned to death. Can you imagine? So James was a martyr for the faith, and he writes, well, let me reflect on reflect. I'm going to use the word reflect. On part one, basically the battle tip or pain management skill, because battle is going to cause pain, is to reflect on past victories, because it's a great faith builder for present and future battles. So if you're in the middle of a trial, if you're suffering pain, it's a good thing to look back and look at what God has brought you through. I mean, really take a time away at your desk or wherever you, and just meditate, look back. I started journaling many years ago, and before it's over with, every year I pull my box of journals out that started in 1993 to present, and I get down in the dumps. I don't have vision. I'm losing momentum, and I got to go back and remember that the same God that gave me victory over the lion and the bear will help me face the Goliath I'm dealing with today. So we're going to get into some more battle tips / pain management skills of this battle, so that we stay combat ready. Because trust me, the new year is going to bring new trials, new challenges. So James begins with, in verse 2, which there's a lot in verse 1 if think about it. Okay, we often skim over this, but when you're trying to read Scripture in context, you want to know, well, who's writing? Who are they writing to? What's happening among those people when this is being written? What are the circumstances? And then what's being said? So even in that verse, James, a servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ. What's interesting, he doesn't say James, half-brother of Jesus. He recognizes his half-brother now. I said in the first episode, there's a verse in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, one of the Gospels, where it says even his own brothers didn't believe him. So there was a time when James was like, yeah, right, bro, you're the Son of God. But obviously, that James would go, look, here's what's being said in that one line, that this half-brother of Jesus would suffer martyrdom for him because he saw enough to believe that Jesus was far more than just his human brother. He was the promised Messiah. Just in that one line, James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes in the dispersion. So he's writing to the Jews that had been scattered because of their faith. And the next line, count it all joy. That's a powerful, powerful line, because the joy he's talking about, the root word means a calm delight, gladness, and cheerfulness. Now, this was being written to people that were living with extreme poverty. They were being rejected by their families and literally killed for their faith. And he says, count it all joy. Have calm delight and gladness and cheerfulness. How in the world do we do that? So I try to think of things from my own life or the lives of other people I've known that I've been inspired by to go, okay, how can I relate this to something? Well, okay, in 2000, for those that don't know, and you probably don't care much about all of my background, but hey, our testimony is what we got, right? Okay, this is what I know. There's a lot of things I don't know, and I don't understand about God, and I don't understand about the world around me, but I know my life and how God has led us through certain things. So that's why I use that. Trust me, it's been fear and trembling and fussing and cussing and complaining all the way. So it's not like I got it right. If y'all just do what I did, maybe God will bless your life like he's blessed mine. No, listen, in my weakness, he's been faithful. He's helped make me strong. Well, anyway, so in reflection, I had left law enforcement to go into full-time youth ministry in 1995. Well, in 1999, I had enough. I'm not going to go into a whole backstory, but my brother had been murdered because of our ministry, or while he was involved in our ministry. We went through hell on earth after that with the people that were involved in that murder, and just a lot of enduring that I got so angry at the fact that I didn't feel a peace about leaving that position, that circumstance, that church, that region yet. I wanted to leave so bad, and I could have, but I knew that God had not given me a peace about doing it. It's not like God would have cast me aside and never used me again, but I knew, and my wife too, we were in agreement, like, as bad as we want to leave, we're not supposed to, not yet. And boy, oh boy, now I could look back and see why. And some of you heard some of our story. If we had left under persecution, we would have missed some key linchpins in our journey. I wouldn't be talking to you today, that's for sure, doing this. Life on the Verge wouldn't exist. And it goes all the way back to the 1997 when this thing was coming up on the trial, and 98. So we endured through a lot of stuff, and now the dust settles and we're okay. During that season, I got so angry at God, I threw a Bible from the front of the sanctuary to the back, actually the other way around, from the back to the front, and busted it into a bunch of pieces. Now that's sin, man. That's hardcore. That's Moses striking the rock. That's hardcore. That's David taking his senses. That's sin. That's Saul offering a sacrifice when he wasn't supposed to. I fell on my knees immediately and repented for being an idiot. Lord, I cried like a baby. It was just a tough season, but we endured it. And ended up, after it was all over with, I felt like the Lord was prodding me to go back into law enforcement. I thought, what? Now my certification has expired? I mean, the important thing I want you to get out of that is that when we made that transition, it wasn't when we were at the bottom of the dip. We didn't make a decision, I'm going to go back into law enforcement. I tried, but that didn't work out, and I knew we weren't supposed to do it at the bottom of the dip. It was at the top of the mountain when everything was going right that we felt like, okay, we have peace. Now we're supposed to make a transition. And that was supposed to be back into law enforcement. I thought, are you kidding? Now, I was 50 pounds overweight. I would have to do another police academy because my certification had expired. And forgive me for you guys that have heard some of this story before, because 5 years, I'm sure, I've told some of it. But I'm going to make a different point this time. So those that don't know, when you talk about joining up with a police department, it's probably gotten easier, and there's probably been some self-fulfilling prophecy from all the people say that all cops suck. So there's probably more cops. They're not getting the caliber of people they used to get because they demean the job so bad. When I say they, I mean the defund the police movement and people that, it's just terrible. I would never apply for that job today. Never, unless God appeared to me in physical form and said, I want you to do this. Not to mention I'm 61 years old, so it wouldn't be a good idea. But even as a young man, I wouldn't advise anybody. You better know that God is calling you to do that, because it was hard enough in my day. I can't even imagine nowadays. With cameras and everybody wants to tell you how to do your job, and you're working life and death every single day. Every single day it can turn. You're eating your ham sandwich and drinking a Diet Coke at lunch, and the next thing you know, you're in the fight of your life, and everybody's taking cell phone video and telling you how to do it better, and all you want to do is get home to your family. Anyway, I could get off on a tangent. So I applied for the job. This was the process back in 1999. I said, okay, Lord, that seems like a wild thing to do, go back in law enforcement. I don't know. Can I get back into law enforcement? Somebody going to hire me? It's a process that's so easy. I've known plenty of people that wanted to be cops, but they failed over something stupid along the way. So anything can happen. So I put in my application, and then it took 8 months altogether. So a month or two or whatever later, I get the opportunity to go down for the first test. And I applied for a couple of police departments. I ended up settling on Virginia Beach. And I walk in. Now, I've got 7 years experience behind me with the Norfolk Police Department. And that's a pretty seasoned department. Back in the day, it was the premier department of the Hampton Roads area. Lots of crime, lots of felonies. I had been a detective for 5 years. And for 3 of those years, I'd worked in forensics, some of the most high-profile murder cases, rape cases in our area. I was a graduate of the Virginia Forensic Science Academy. My department sent me to a 3-month school, a resident. They got me a hotel. I stayed for 3 months to study nothing but forensics at the State Laboratory in Richmond. And so that's a pretty good credential to have because not everybody gets chosen to do that. So I show up day one, and you take this super simple little test that I probably took me 5 minutes. Then you fill out this card with your information on it. This was a different process than I went through before. And that's it. So they got your information. They know nothing about you. They know that, okay, you passed this simple intelligence test, and now we got your information. And here's the next thing I had to do. Go sit on the floor, and I can't really do it here. Sit on the floor and bend forward as far as you can without buckling your knees and see how far you can reach. It's called the sit and reach test. Now, I had, for 4 months before that, I had gone into training, man. I'd lost a ton of, by the time it was over with, I'd lost that 50 pounds. I was running every day. One thing I wasn't doing is I wasn't stretching. And I failed that test. And the guy looked at me and he went, nope, there's the door. Just like that. He knew nothing about my background. I was just, because I couldn't reach far enough, I'm out. Well, I'm getting ready to walk out the door. I'm standing there just puzzled while another guy fails the test. And as we're heading out the door, he hollers and he says, y'all want to come back tomorrow and try again? You can. I said, okay. So, buddy, I got up the next day, actually that day too. I did hamstring stretches like you can't believe. I mean, by the time it was over with a couple of days later, my ham hocks were killing me, right? My hamstrings. But I passed that test the next day, and I passed the other test, and then I did the obstacle course, and that was like you had to do it like in 3 minutes or something, and you jump a bunch of fences and climb over stuff and drag a 100-pound dummy and all this stuff. And I watched a girl fail it by like 3 seconds or something, and the sergeant over it said, nope, see you later. There was a part of me that valued that. Like, this is elite. Now, Virginia Beach at the time, and I guess still, they're probably getting the cream of the crop between them and Fairfax when it comes to Virginia. They were the highest paid, and it's the beach, so they got cop applications from all over the country, especially the East Coast, would want to come to work for Virginia Beach. So I passed all that and ended up having to go through then you have to go through a serious written test. You had to go through a background check. They do an investigation. They this again takes months as they go through this process. Then you take 3 psychological tests, written tests. One of them is 600 questions or something like that. And then that all gets evaluated, and you get interviewed by a psychologist or a psychiatrist, one or the other. And then after all this is done, you go for a physical with a doctor, and then it all gets submitted to this team that looks at everything in your jacket, all your testing, all that stuff that you went through, and then you go for a final interview with this big group of people, circle of people that want to ask you questions about things in this jacket, and then you finally get a letter that you've been hired or you've been rejected. And I got hired. And matter of fact, there were 650 applicants, and of the 650 applicants, only 50 were chosen for classes, police academy classes, close to 50. And both of them were about split half down the middle. I rounded to 50. It was around 50. And our class was, I don't think it was 25, it was 23 or something like that. But everybody in that class, I mean, there was a Notre Dame graduate, a Bradford graduate, a Virginia Tech graduate, a former Navy diver, 2 or 3 former cops or cops from different police departments. Everybody there was not a person in my class that was not former law enforcement. At least 2/3 of the class had a college degree. They were either former law enforcement or former military, every single one of them. And man, we faced 6 months of utter torture. And I'm not embellishing it at all. I would laugh at how bad what PT, physical trained us at the end of the day. It was academically rigorous, a test every single week. If you failed that test, you got one more try to get it right. Then you were put on probation. You got one more test on Friday. If you failed, you were out of the academy. It was very rigorous when it came to the academics, but 2 hours a day minimum. They would torture us physically in every kind. I've never been through anything like that in my life. They would inspect us in the morning. You'd come in, you'd get inspected, and they found anything. Like one morning, I forgot to shave, and I didn't have even this much at all. And I was only 37 years old, and I really hadn't gotten to the point where I had to shave every single day but they would get right up on your face. It was very paramilitary, hardcore. And I had to write this long letter and go out at lunchtime and get a razor and shave and show them that I'd shaved. And so the goal of the police academy was to make you quit. That was the goal. Make you quit. You're not going to finish this. You don't have a chance. You are either going to endure, press through all their head games, all the physical challenges, or you were going to quit. And by the time it was over, only one guy ended up not making it. In the beginning, one guy went to the hospital for 11 days because of dehydration and damage to his kidneys or something. Altogether, 3 people fell out in the first couple of days once they started PTing us. But this was a 6-month academy. All but one of us graduated after that. One of them got released at the very end for something stupid. He'd made a bad decision. How am I doing? I got 31 minutes. Okay, give me 2 more minutes, 3 more minutes, and I'll finish this. What the guy did is we did a training exercise where somebody was in a room with a gun threatening to kill themselves, and you had to negotiate with them from outside the door. You got your weapon drawn because they've got a gun. And the guy with the gun to his head says, "I'll put my gun down if you put yours down." Oh, no. Well, this guy actually put his gun down. Of course, then the guy that was going to kill himself pointed the gun at him, and it was over. While I was enduring that, I would almost come to tears at the privilege and the honor to be part of what I considered an elite group of individuals. And some of you have been part of something like that. Maybe you've been in the military or some sort of, special thing where it was an honor to be chosen. And that is the battle tip I'll leave you with today. Remember that you were chosen. You didn't choose Jesus. He chose you. And the Bible says that we're a chosen race, a royal priesthood. We're chosen by God for eternity. So these momentary afflictions that we're dealing with in this life, if we'll remember that, look, this is going to be over. And none of us enjoy pain. Man, I don't. But it helps. It helped me in the academy. I would say, okay, I've only got one more day. If I can finish this day, and it was definitely a whole new threshold for me in going through all of that. And today, even I know I'm kind of out of shape right now, but I know what I got to do, and I know what I can tolerate. I know what my threshold is, and I can do it if I put my mind on it. So that's another one of the benefits. But remember, you can count it all joy when you reflect on the fact that God didn't have to choose you. And I'm not going to get into Calvinistic doctrine here, but if you're a believer, there was some predestination at work that you would have the faith to believe on Jesus. So I'll leave you with that. We're already into 33 minutes. Thanks for listening or watching. Bear with me as I figure out how to do this technology. I'm open to criticisms. Just don't be a hater. If the lighting's bad, I'm going to try to learn some more tricks to make it more interesting. Maybe next year we'll do some more short form stuff like the Keystones that I did last year, because not everybody had. But look, Joe Rogan's podcast is 3 hours long. So, hey, anyway, God bless you. Have a great week. I hope you're more combat ready today than you were yesterday.
Sometimes fallen angels fly.
Life on the Verge is a completely donor-funded IRS 501c3. If you'd like to make a tax-deductible donation or learn more about our work inside and outside of prison, visit lifeontheverge.com. If you'd like to hear more of our music, visit theplunders.com.